This is Tracy Drummond. Today is the 3rd day of October 2014. I am in Macon, Georgia with Linda Wilson, who is going to be interviewed today for the Grady School of Nursing Oral History Project. This interview is being done on behalf of the Southern Labor Archives. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning, Tracy.
And thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get started. Just some basic background info. Where were you born and if you don't mind, when?
I was born in February of 1949 in a little town called Dixie Union, Georgia. I was born at home, the third child in what was going to be an 11-child family.
Wow.
My father was a sharecropping farmer, and my mother, of course, was a stay-at-home mom with that many kids, but we all worked very hard.
Did you all have to help out around the house?
Yes, making a living as a sharecropping farmer.
Okay.
Yes, we moved often, had to follow the work.
Right.
But we actually stayed in Ware County.
Okay.
And the great thing was when I was 6 years old, we moved to Waresboro, Georgia, and that became our home, and we stayed there for the rest of my mom and dad's life. And my husband and I actually live in that community to this day.
Really?
So once we moved to Waresboro, that became home.
Okay. Well, with 11 brothers and sisters, and I'm sure there was a lot of emphasis on helping out and getting work done. But how did being a sharecropping family, how did that affect your education when you were growing up?
Well, first of all, Mom and Dad neither had the benefit of a high school. Both of them lived in families wherein it was necessary for them to quit school and help make a living. And what that did for Mom and Dad was gave them a great desire that all of us would be able to go to school. So, yes, we worked hard, but we were in school unless it was just absolutely necessary. And there were days that we would have to stay home, but then we would make up work. As a matter of fact, I can remember as a high school student, in the spring, we would get up very early so that we would go to the field and work for an hour or so, then rush home, get cleaned up, and get to school. That was how important it was to Mom and Dad for us to get an education. Now, they did not, neither of them even finished grade school, but they were very much inquisitive, self-teaching themselves. My dad was a whiz at math. He had to be to keep up with all the details of growing a crop and how much did things bring, so that he would feel like he was getting his fair share at the end, and certainly making every penny stretch to be able to keep us all fed and clothed.
So, what were some of the way? Because so I'm sure he earned money. He earned the exchange of money for the work he did. But did y'all also get some of the crops to sort of put up and eat, or did you have your own small garden?
Well, actually, he never got paid for any labor.
Oh, really? Okay.
His labor.
Okay.
So what the deal was, he would rent, he would go to someone, tobacco and corn were the money crops. And he would pay someone X number of dollars to be able to plant X number of acres of either corn or tobacco. And then he would supply the labor and the equipment for tractors and whatever. He would pay half of all of the fertilizer bill and the plants, whatever the cost of actually producing the crop. Dad would pay half of that, and then if there was any money left over, so the crop would be planted, it would be harvested, it would be sold, And at that point, after the money for his lease and his half of all the expenses of the crop, if there was any left, then he would get part of that.
Okay.
And many times we would only break even. There would not be any money left. So he was very resourceful, I think. He got a job during the winter driving a school bus. This was after we were in Waresboro. And that was a godsend for us. And later, when we were big enough and we'd been there a while, we became the janitors at the elementary school for several years.
Okay, wow.
So he was always looking for a way for us to be able to have the money we needed. So we grew hogs. We had a huge garden. We had a huge freezer. So we would grow our own vegetables, and we priority getting those early on canned in jars, but then later we got the freezer and we were able to do it.
Okay.
So I have memories of many times sitting out behind the house in the yard in a circle, shelling beans, shelling peas. Mother would tell us Bible stories, try to keep it interesting by asking questions and, making a game out of it as much as you can. But, oh, yes, we worked. But I think back now and realize how dedicated my mom and dad were to the family, to making a living, but also to wanting us to all have more than they had. And they didn't realize that at the time, but the tremendous work ethic they gave us is the gift. It was much more a blessing than had they been able to hand us money.
Right.
And they were able to buy a house, an old house, but that was their home. And later, when my brother went through med school and became a radiologist, he was able to supply the money for upgrading that and making it a better home for them. So they taught us that working hard and certainly working together, you can accomplish goals. So that was our heritage. That was our heritage.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah. Well, and can I ask this? You said you were born at home. Was there a woman in the community who was sort of a midwife that would come around, or was a doctor called?
Actually, the doctor came out to our house, and Mother told me the story of that day, which is quite fascinating. I'm a really go-getter, and I accuse, when she tells me the story, that day she thought she was going to be in labor by the end of she had the signs. Dad was out plowing the field, so she got up and washed all the clothes in the house, hung them out to dry, mopped everything, even went outside and raked the yards. But at that point they were using brush brooms. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
It's just like a bundle of straw.
Yes, because they didn't have grass so much as they just had sand. So she did all of that, and then she sent for my grandmother, my daddy's mother, this little house they lived in was just a little tenement. It sounded like not much more than a little shack behind that had been a storage house for my granddaddy and grandmama's farm. So anyway, she sent for her, and sure enough, I was born that afternoon. So I said, Mom, you didn't rest at all. No. You just kept on doing it all. And then, but the doctor did come.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. His name was Dr. Flanagan. Okay. I don't remember his first name, but he served that area for many, many years.
Okay. That's a great story. So you worked on the farm, you went through school. What was school like then? Was it was it several grades in a room together, or were you in a big enough community that each grade had its own classroom?
Elementary school, well, all through school, we were all in different rooms. We never were in a school that was small enough. Now, my first few months from September until December, I was in a little school called the Bickley School. And it was a very small school, and I can't remember much about that because I was only 6. But if we were ever combined as classes, it would have been then. But then in January, the sharecroppers' lives, January to December. So if you're going to move, you move in January. So we moved to Waresboro that year.
Okay.
So from that time on, we went through the Ware County schools, the elementary school. God was with us in this, that the house that we rented before we moved to the house that Mom and Dad later owned was only about a block from the school.
Okay.
So we were able to walk to school. We were able to walk home for lunch.
Right.
And then get back and that saved a tremendous amount of money because of so many of us. It was much easier, cost effective to feed us from home. And so there were so many of us. I remember us, we would meet each other, because there were the different lunch times, periods for different ages. So we would meet someone and they would tell us what we were having for lunch. So that was one of the things. But we were always in separate classrooms.
Okay.
Dedicated.
All 11 of you ended up in a separate grade at a time.
Yes.
And it moved on.
Well, we have one set of twins.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And they were in the same. But they finally, I think there were enough classrooms that they separated them.
Okay.
Because Waresboro was a pretty big school. They started kind of getting together, closing some of the very, very small schools. And Waresboro became sort of a conglomerate. So, yes. So.
And were there 12 grades?
Our half-sister, who is number 1 of the 11, when she was in school, it was through the 12th grade.
Okay.
But then they moved to high school. They built a new high school that again combined 2 or 3, and Waresboro was one of them that closed the high school. And so then it was just grades 1 through 8. And at the time I went through, there were no kindergarten.
Okay.
Or preschool.
Okay. And 8 was the equivalent of 12.
No. Then we would go from the 8th grade, then we would be bused to this new high school.
Oh, I see.
So I'm speaking of on site at the school that we started to in Waresboro.
Okay. And everyone graduated.
I had one brother who got a GED, and I actually have one brother, the baby brother in the family, who quit school at 16 and came very close to getting his GED, but decided it's never.
Okay.
So you can imagine how hard he's pushing for his son, who graduated high school this year, to get, and he is now enrolled in a vocational technical college. Okay. So all of the rest of us did.
Okay. And and I'm sure your parents were so proud that you were graduating, that most of you did, given, like you were talking about earlier, their experiences. So then after graduation, what was expected of you? Not you, all the kids. What were the next steps? The
next steps were we were expected to get a job.
Okay.
And be productive. And if we lived at home, we were charged a certain amount of rent, of board.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. I mean, that's great, but
yes, very different.
Largely unheard of.
Different. Now, My half-sister, actually moved out of my mom and her stepdad's. My dad was her stepdad. She actually moved out of that household and moved in with her dad and stepmom when she was 16. But the rest of us were there, and as we graduated, I graduated in 1967. My older brother graduated in 1968 and was drafted.
Okay.
And then my next sibling, younger than me, was a boy also, and he also was drafted. So we had two in the Vietnam War situation. Mm-hmm. But basically, we all knew that if we were going to seek higher education, it would be on our own ticket, mm-hmm. because Mom and Dad still had all of these younger siblings.
Right.
That they supported us in that they encouraged us. Mm-hmm. They felt like higher education was wonderful. But they could not. I mean, in the 3 years I was at Grady, my mom and dad never gave me any money.
Really?
They just didn't have it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that was up front. Mm-hmm. I understood that.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons I worked so hard in high school. Mm-hmm. I graduated second in my class.
Really?
There was like less than half a point between my GPA and the valedictorian. Mm-hmm. So when I started, when I applied to Grady, they let me know that if I could pay for if I could get a loan somehow for the first year, that after I got there and proved myself academically, and that I was going to be able to stay, that they would give me scholarship.
Okay.
For the last 2 years.
Okay. All right. Let me go back. You mentioned that two of your brothers went to Vietnam.
Yes.
How did that impact your family? That must have been a really difficult time.
It was a very, very difficult time. And I tell you that only our relationship with God and our strong faith mm-hmm. in Him, we became members of a old community church in Wearsboro, and we attended there faithfully and learned the promises of God and came into relationship with Jesus to know that He was with them. Mm-hmm. Even though they were there, much prayer went up, mm-hmm. Not only for them but for so many, because right. almost every family had sons in that war. Mm-hmm. I remember one particular story. My older brother had been, and then my younger brother went, and he actually went to Germany. He may have enlisted, I can't remember. But he was going to, because he had to spend 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I remember how hard she prayed that he would not have to go to Vietnam. But I remember her telling us the story, how that the Holy Spirit spoke into her heart one day and said to her, ask her the question, am I a bigger God in Germany than I am in Vietnam? In other words, helping her to see that wherever my brothers were, right. that He was there. And that gave her peace. Mm-hmm. And she was able to kind of get things in perspective from that. So excited to get letters from them, mm-hmm. wrote them. I have a vivid memory of my first year in nursing school going down to the Red Cross and taping my brother Bill a message for Christmas.
Oh, okay.
The Red Cross had that service.
Okay. And so it was an audio recording?
Yes, okay. On a little...
Okay.
Some kind of...
Like a little reel-to-reel? Maybe?
Yes. I don't... It was just an audio. Mm-hmm. But I remember sending him I can't remember. I think I sent him a can of fiddlesticks, thinking that would be something they could do, and some kind of treat. And I don't remember, probably hard candies of some sort, but sending that to him and just feeling so excited to be able to send him something.
Right.
Walking down to the Red Cross, and I have no idea where that, how far that was, but that was in the spring of 1968, I think, that I did that.
Do you know, did you find out if he received it?
He did receive it, and he remembered it. Even to this day, I can ask him, and he still has memories of that.
Okay.
So
That must have meant a lot, given where he was and what he was responsible for. So.
right.
So they were drafted. Did you immediately decide to go to nursing school, or did you work for a while? I mean, how did you find out about Grady? What, post high school leading up to Grady, what was going on in your life?
What happened was this half-sister, who's number 1 in our 11, actually went to Grady.
Oh, okay.
And she chose Grady because her stepmother went to Grady.
Okay.
She graduated in like 1941. Sandra graduated in 1964. So she graduated just as I was going into high school.
Okay.
So I had that. I felt like if she could do it, I could do it. I learned just this year when I brought her to the reunion with us.
Okay.
I gave her that as a little gift. And she told me on the trip up that she cried every day at Grady for a whole month. But she never told me that.
Right. Well, was she?
She was just homesick.
Okay.
Just homesick. She had never. And you have to realize, Tracy, that we never went anywhere. There was no money for us to go anywhere. We didn't have transportation. We were content because you don't miss what you have never had. But it was hard. Now, she did more than we did because she had those for 16, 17, 18. She was in her dad's household, and they had more means. And her mother was working at our local hospital, and she was still working there when I went to work there in 1970. But I felt like if she could do it, I probably could do it, and I had that connection, so I knew how. I wrote to them early I applied early in my senior year and got all these things figured out. My pastor's wife, who had lived in Griffin, and then they came down to pastor our little church, actually drove me to Atlanta.
Really nice.
And for my interviews and tours and all of that, because I look back and I'm trying to figure out how would that have happened. I never thought of it, but because God supplied the need, So we did that, and actually, when I was at Grady, they had returned to Griffin to start a new church there. So, by the grace of God, they would come to Grady and pick me up on Friday afternoons, probably at least a couple times a month, and take me to their house and treat me like their child.
Right.
And I would be able to be in a home, because I couldn't afford to go back to home. I would usually get there maybe once a month, or my husband, who was my fiance at that time, he would either come up or I would ride the bus home once a month. Okay. So we would see each other once a month.
So you met him while you were in high school?
I did.
Tell me about that.
Well, he
what's his name?
His name is Jerry.
Okay.
And he is like 6.5 years older than I am. Okay. We started dating when I was 16 in the 10th grade. We met at church. He worked at the He actually lived in Jacksonville for a while. He was going to be a draftsman with the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
But then he couldn't take that office work. He didn't like being inside in a shirt and tie. So he came back to Waresboro. And that's when we met. And so we started dating.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked out of the coastline, what was the Atlantic Coastline Railroad, which is now CSX. But he was there working as a machinist.
Okay.
So he went through his machinist training, and then became a machinist. And he worked there for almost 40 years.
Was he by any chance a member of the Machinist Union when he was there?
He was.
He was.
Yes, he was.
Excellent. So you met in church and then you went away to school.
I went away to school.
And he would either come up and see you or you would take the bus
Yes.
home. So what was the bus ride like from Atlanta to Waresboro?
Well, the bus station was actually in Waycross.
Okay.
But it was, for this country girl, now you just have to picture in your mind me going to Atlanta, Georgia. And it was 1967,
Mm-hmm.
so it's compared to what Atlanta is now,
Mm-hmm.
it was, but I had never been to a town. We went to Waycross from time to time. We went to high school, went to church in my community. I had never been anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did go to Washington, D.C. on my senior class trip. I was thinking about that when I was walking the dog this week. Rode the train
Okay.
with 40-something seniors, and actually some of my teachers chipped in money because I really didn't have the money to do it, but I'll never forget their kindness because they wanted me to be able to go, and that was a real eye-opener. So I had been to Washington for that 5 days, but other than that, our world was very small.
Mm-hmm.
But so when I got to Grady, I'll never forget how it felt. Jerry actually took me on that September, I think it was the 11th, that we actually moved into the dorm with our regulation foot locker and all the things. They sent us a list that we had to have, and I felt like we had to have every single thing, which we used most of it, but now it's like, who would think of telling you that you had to have a foot locker? But anyway, how I felt when he drove off, and I was there, and for the first time in my life, I was by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it took some doing for me to even get used to sleeping in the same bed by myself, because I had never slept in a bed by myself.
Really? You'd always been in with one of your siblings?
Yes, one of the sisters, because it took a lot of beds for that many people, and we had small rooms in our house, and so some of our siblings slept on what you call rollaway beds. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but they folded up.
Okay, yeah.
And then at night you would put them out. They're much more comfortable than the hideaway sofa beds, because they had full-size mattresses, but they were, for space. But anyway, I was so thankful for the opportunity that I kind of pushed myself through.
Well, you said that your older sister had cried every day.
I didn't know that. If I had known that, I told her, I said, Sandra, I'm glad you didn't tell me, because she was always sort of the hero. The one that, had done more things and all that. And if she had told me that, I'm not sure I would have been brave enough. But I did okay. Jerry and I wrote each other every night. Well, he wrote me every single night. I wrote him probably at least 90% of the time.
Okay.
And I will tell you now, just as a little side, when our sons were in college, we wrote them every single night.
Really?
And usually it was their dad who did it. Sometimes if things were going on, I would do it. But most of the time, he wrote them.
Do y'all still have all those letters?
We do not. Now, the sons may have some of them, but no, we did not keep all those. That didn't seem important at the time. But
That would be
we'll never forget the fact that we did write each other. So we felt closer. And I would also call him collect once a week. So, and because he worked 3 to 11 shift. So, and I don't remember what day. It might have been, I can't remember what, but one designated day of the week, before he went to work in the afternoon, I would call and talk to him for maybe 3 minutes. So, anyway.
That's great. That's commitment. That's, now it's just a text message. Not even full words.
Right.
No, and it's very romantic too. I mean, the ladies don't get a lot of that these days.
Oh,
so.
I know. And the letters. Yes, because you'd go to every single day, you'd go to the post office, and I knew I was going to have a letter. And that was very encouraging. And so I studied hard at Grady. And I found out, and we were going to Georgia State. You know that we took our academic courses
At Georgia State.
So we were in classes with bona fide, Georgia State students. So we just sort of were, in other words, it wasn't just Grady teachers who were teaching us. It was Georgia State, which was then college, now it's university.
Right.
So once I got through, I'll never forget how I felt at after those first final exams at Georgia State. And getting those grades and realizing that my study had paid off and that I felt like I could do this.
Right. Well, what sort of academic classes did you take at Georgia State?
Oh, goodness. We took biology, 2 courses of biology. We took, which was anatomy and physiology. We dissected a fetal pig. We did microbiology. We did sociology. We did an English. I can't remember. That's not all of them because we had like a full load for 3 quarters.
But were y'all taking the Georgia State classes at the same time you were taking your nursing class? So
Basic nursing. Yes. Okay. So we were busy we were in classes from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5. And that would be either at Georgia State or taking basic nursing courses. And then after the first quarter, then we started going into the hospital, working.
Having your
clinicals.
Okay. So what was the typical clinical shift?
All day.
It was all day.
We would report. We would be on the area at 6:45, and we would our day would end at 3:15. And we would be assigned patients. We would be totally in charge of their care. Now, there would be someone, our instructors would be around. And I've wondered about this later, but it's not real clear in my memory whether we had a nurse that was, or if it was just the nurse manager that we'd go to if we had, problems. But I don't think we had like someone connected at the hip like we do nurses, like the clinicals now. And the reason I know that is because I've taught CNAs once during my career, and we would take them to the hospital for clinicals. And while they had a patient, then the patient actually belonged to a hospital staff member. But I don't remember that at Grady.
And you would do anything the patient needed?
Well, it's according to where we were in our
in our
training.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So we would start off doing bed baths and, giving their personal hygiene kind of stuff and making their beds.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got them through, we would give their medicines and do whatever treatments that needed to be done. So, but we were there, and once we got, we literally were doing whatever needed to be done. We were giving the nursing care for the patients, and that's the way they were able to give us an education, because my total education cost, I know I borrowed $600 for the first year, and it seems like it wasn't that much for the other 2 years because they knew we were going to be working in the hospital. Mm-hmm. But even if it was $600 per year, can you imagine? Because that included our courses at Georgia State. That included uniforms and laundering those uniforms. That included our dorms. That included our meals, although we got tired of eating in the hospital cafeteria.
I heard there was some good fried chicken in that cafeteria.
There probably was. I don't remember that per se. Mm-hmm. But it was certainly more variety of food than I'd ever had. Mm-hmm. And more, I gained like 5 pounds the first quarter because, it was like, and they told us in nutrition, our course, Marjorie Wallace, she is now deceased, but I remember her saying, now y'all going to need to be careful because you're studying so much, you're not nearly as active, it's going to be really easy for you to gain weight. I'll never forget her saying that. But anyway, you did get tired because the menu was the same. They would rotate days, but it was, and we all had this thing about hamburger steak because we ate so much hamburger steak. That was one of our jokes. But anyway, even if it cost $600 a year, that was an amazing. And I'll tell you one little side thing. When I started working at our hospital, I had 1 week's orientation on days, and then I was put on 3 to 11 as the charge nurse. I was the only RN, and I hadn't taken my boards yet, but I was RN, board eligible, on a 40-bed medical ward. I was the only nurse, but that's not my story. The physicians, as they would come around, I would get introduced. And there was one doctor named W.L. Pomeroy, and there was a senior, and then his son was working there. So senior, junior, but senior came by and was being introduced to me, and he said to me and to the people around, well, I expect I know more about Ms. Wilson than a lot of other people. And I just kind of looked at him because, to my knowledge, I'd never met him before. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that his wife was the president of the women's auxiliary, the physician's auxiliary group that loaned me the $600.
Ah.
And they got my grades every quarter. They got a copy of my grades. I had no idea of knowing any of that. So he was alluding to that, and that was kind of like, okay. Oh, goodness.
Well, I'm sorry, were you going to...
No, I'm thinking I'm talking too much.
No, that's what this is about.
Okay.
You taught me asking questions, but in such a way that you tell stories and stuff. No, so you said you watched your fiance drive away. And yes. How soon did you start? And you even said that you were kind of uncomfortable sleeping in a bed alone, which I can't imagine. I can't imagine. But then, how soon did you start making friends? How soon did that turn into camaraderie with the other girls? And did you have 2 or 3 to a room, or how did that work?
We had two to a room to begin with, and for the first month, we had assigned roommates. And I guess that was the only way they could do it. But that was a kind of a tough month because the young woman that I was rooming with was from a totally different set of, she was as different as you could be from me. And she was kind, but we didn't connect. In other words, we shared a room, but she already had some friends that she knew. But I assumed, we were in groups, so we would be with the same people every day. And of course that helps. And then because you had so much structure, you didn't have a lot of time to think about any. It was kind of like being in some ways, it was kind of like being in high school in that you were with that same class. In other words, Group D, which was my group, we had Georgia State classes at the same time. We had our nursing, basic nursing. So that core group, and that was probably, I can't remember, 12 to 15, maybe 20 to begin with, because lots, after first quarter, like about 40% of our class had flunked out.
Really?
Yes.
Was that common?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And then we started with 140 something, close to 150, I think. And I think we graduated around 70. So
the class was pretty much cut in half.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, was the School of Nursing integrated by the time you?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
was that the first time you had spent a lot of time with African? I mean, because I'm assuming the school you went to was not integrated.
That's correct.
So
well, actually, 67. Probably not, but was soon after then. Was soon after then. But we probably had 5 or 6 Afro-American women in our classes, and there were several of those at the reunion, and we were very much remembered our connections. We were hugging, and greeting each other, because after that period of time, we really got close. But after the first month, we got to choose, and so I started rooming with someone who was in my group, and we then roomed for about a year, and then we were able to move into then so many people dropped out that we were able to have a room each. There was enough, and so we all had our own room. And then when we went in our senior year, Armstrong Hall was it was just like, if we could just make it to get over there, it was like the Ritz-Carlton of the dormitories, because we had a suite. You had a bedroom connected by a bath and a bedroom. So you had 2 people with their own baths, because all this other time in the dorms, you had lined up showers, and lavatories and commode. It was like being, well, it was in a dorm.
Yeah.
But I think most dorms now, I don't know if that's still, I know so many college students have their own apartments or whatever. I don't know.
I think they more have like the suite setup you were talking about, that maybe it's 4 individual bedrooms with a common area and 2 bathrooms. I think they, when universities are able, because Georgia State is finally, or for the last maybe 5 to 10 years, started putting dorms, and it's really becoming less of a commuter campus. And we have 35,000 students now. So my understanding is that the dorms on campus are like that, where it's more of a traditional living arrangement instead of giving 2 young people a tiny room and having them walk down the hall to go to a communal bathroom. So,
And that's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
Yeah. So, what were some of your favorite classes that you took? What were some of the things that got you really excited?
I'm not sure excitement is the right word. Basically, Tracy,
Motivated.
whatever was presented to me, I made myself really study. I didn't give myself, I'm not trying to be bragging about myself, but in all my life up until this point, it was like, this needs doing, so do it. So that's sort of the way it was with my courses.
Okay.
It was like, now I disliked, maybe that will be easier.
Okay.
I disliked orthopedics. Oh, I really did not like it.
And for the uninitiated, what is orthopedics?
Bones,
Okay.
skeletal system.
Okay.
So a lot of people with broken bones and cast and all of that. But the attitude of the instructor, who will remain unnamed, had a lot to do with that. But I didn't enjoy that particular. And I did not enjoy operating room because that was very anxiety producing for me. Because going in, we actually had, I don't know how much you know about the operating room.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, you know that people, when they have surgery, they have a team. And the team, of course, will be the person who gives anesthesia, the doctor who does the surgery, and then they have nurses who scrub in and are sterile at the table, handing the instruments and stuff. And then there's also a nurse that's called a circulating nurse that's there to get anything that's needed. Like, you predict you're going to need a certain setup, but the surgeon, when they make an incision, they may find something they didn't anticipate. So you need additional instruments, equipment, etc. And the circulating nurse also does all the paperwork, recording times when the anesthesia starts, So a lot of recording. But we had to actually do certain number of cases where we were the scrub nurse, actually handling the instruments. That was very anxiety producing for me. And actually, I remember saying, God, if you'll help me get through this, I won't go into an operating room again. And I did get through it. But a few years later, I found myself being approached in my hospital after I'd worked there for about 6 months. A general surgeon came to me and said, I'd like you to be my office nurse. And by the way, that means you'll be going to the operating room with me, being my personal scrub nurse, which meant I would be assisting him. There would be these other people. But I took that job and worked that job for like almost 10 years. And then did some other things for about a year, and then was approached and asked if I would come be the operating room supervisor in our hospital. And so I did that for 13 years.
Okay.
And instead of being the one in the room, I was the one responsible for all those people who were in the rooms,
Right.
all the equipment, everything, making sure that the surgeons had everything they needed. So I'm sure God's still chuckling over that. But it seemed the right, and I think that was the right decision. Hard work. But I feel like that was a real contribution as far as, I still have people stop me even this many years later. I worked for the general surgeon from 1971 until the end of 1980. That's a long time ago. But I still have people come up to me in Walmart's or the grocery store and say, I remember you helping the surgeon do my surgery. And it meant a lot because I was able to see them in the office, help with their surgery. So I would actually be there at their bedside before they went to sleep, saying, and then make rounds with him while they were in the hospital, and then see them coming back to the office. So,
A familiar face.
yes. And I think it meant more to them than I even realized then. So, but anyway, OR I didn't much enjoy. The Georgia State classes were pretty intimidating because there were so many people. You know, the amphitheaters and the one instructor, and there was mandatory attendance as far as Grady expected us to do. Now, I'm not saying that everybody went every time, but it was kind of, I guess it was encouraging and it was confidence building knowing that I could succeed in that new environment. So I was sang in the chorus at Grady.
Okay, so there were
I
extracurricular
love that.
activities.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so in addition to chorus, what?
There was the Student Government Association. There was the, I think they had a Georgia Nursing Association that was for students. So I didn't get into, I did chorus. I was chaplain of our classes. We were organized, each class with president and all that. So we had for more than 1 year. But let's see. I can't think of any other organized things. The annual, maybe somebody, you can ask somebody who you're going to interview to bring their, if you really would like to know. I can't remember right off.
Yeah,
but there was this lady named Mildred Trotter. And I think, and she was hired as like our, what would you call her now? She helped, she was just there for the students. She would like get tickets for Braves games, or she would get, that was the year, 68 was when Six Flags Over Georgia was built. So we got complimentary tickets and went out there. She would plan picnics for special days, you know. And she was kind of in charge. Why can't I think of what you would call her?
I don't know. She sounds magical.
She was. She was almost like a student representative or something. That she just wanted to make it more fun for us. So to give us some extracurricular things to do.
Okay.
So she did. I don't think she ever married, but she was very into students. She took every opportunity. I can almost see her sitting in an administrator's office saying, "I need some money, so I can do something for these students." So I remember that well.
Okay. When your fiance would come visit, were you allowed to leave and go on a date or have lunch or dinner? Or?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we were. But at that time, the dorms had house mothers.
Okay.
And, of course, members of the opposite sex could not go any... They had these little rooms that were set up on the first floor that were common rooms. A couple of them might have been smaller so that you could visit in. But you would have to sign out, and you had a curfew. And I think weekend curfew, it could have been midnight. But not through the week. Through the week, we had mandatory study hours from 7 to 9. We had to be in our dorm studying, either in our room or in the library or somewhere.
Okay.
Which, by the way, that was one way I made money when I was there. I was in charge of the library. I would work in the library, and I made like $1 and maybe 25 cents or something an hour. But those were good because you could study if there weren't, because sometimes people would come in, but not very much, because these were the libraries in the dorms. We had, I think there were a couple on campus, So I hadn't thought of that in a while. But sometimes we would go off. This friend in Griffin that I talked about, her husband actually died suddenly of a heart attack at age 53 in the spring of 1968. And even after he died, though, she would continue to come and get me. And sometimes Jerry would she would get me on Friday night, and he would, because he worked till 11 on Friday night, he would drive part of the way up, spend the night in a hotel, and then come to her house on Saturday morning, and then spend the night at her house on Saturday night. And we'd go to church together that next day, and he would take me home that evening when he needed to. So, yes, we could. And many of the graduates that we saw at the reunion remembered him almost as well as they did me, because they had seen he had been such a steady presence, throughout the 3 years. Yeah.
Was he the one at the reunion taking all the photos?
No.
Maybe that was Mary's husband.
That was Mary's husband, and Al and Judy's husband. Al was also. They were both doing. One was doing, I think, still, and one was doing videos. I think. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I got them confused. Were there things in Atlanta did y'all ever go have a girls' night out in Atlanta? Did y'all ever go and?
Well, one of the Piedmont Park, and isn't there a big zoo? What's the zoo?
Oh, it's Grant Park. It's
Grant
in Grant Park. It's
okay.
Grant Park. Yeah.
We would do class things out at those places.
Okay.
There would be class activities. And one year, our freshman year, I think, we went to some park or somewhere where there's just a big lake and spent the day on a Saturday.
Okay.
People that had money would go to movies and out to eat and that, but quite frankly, I didn't have the money for that. I think I went to the varsity in the 3 years, maybe twice.
Okay.
And Underground Atlanta was built during the time I was at Grady. As a matter of fact, the senior superlative pictures, some of them were taken down in Underground Atlanta. So that was a big thing. I never went. Jerry and I never went. But we just, and of course there were a lot of fraternity parties and all of that, and the tech ball games and all that. But again, because I was engaged, that wasn't something that I participated in. But a lot of the nursing students did. Okay. A lot of them met their future husbands at those parties. Yeah. Judy and Al. That was one of the ones.
Well, who were some of your mentors, or some of your favorite instructors or administrators in the program? Can you?
The Hilton Twins. Did you meet them?
I did not.
Geneva, Hilton, and Veneda, I think, was the others. Veneda. Might need to check me on that one.
Okay.
They did a Bible study, and I attended that, so I got pretty close to them in that and felt some camaraderie. They had been missionaries in Africa, and they came back because of the political situation and found themselves at Grady, and they continued to teach there. They retired. I think they taught up until the school closed and then worked in some of the clinics. But they were very good instructors. All of our instructors I really enjoyed. Sheila Lely was she's now Sheila Blake, was very vivacious. I don't think, other than the one that remains unnamed from orthopedics. Most of the other instructors I felt a real connection to. I felt like that they were there wanting us to do well and wanting to give their whatever it took from their side of it. Now, I taught for 6.5 years after I retired, after I left the hospital at our vocational technical college. So I've got a little more insight into the whole teaching picture. But they were all just really good. It's amazing. Miss Trask, Phyllis Trask, was our very first, our basic nursing teacher. So she's the one that taught us how to do bed baths and all of, taking blood pressures and temperatures and all of those basic skills, making beds and all of that. And she'll always live in my memory because that was the foundation. But I was thinking when she had a baby, she had a little boy that she, of course, talked about, and a very, very handsome husband. We saw him a couple of times. But when I was at the reunion, I asked her, I said, how old was your baby? And she had him like 3 months before she started teaching there.
Okay.
So at the time, she looked so seasoned and experienced and all of that. We stood in awe of her. And all of that is, but it's like she was very new. So from our angle, it was like, oh, she's been here 100 years doing this thing. And now from my experience of getting kids to school and all that, I can just see how hard it was for her to get there, especially on clinical days when they were supposed to be there at 6:45 with us. I'm thinking, how did she do it? But anyway, but all of my instructors were really good. And I guess Miss Dixon I didn't know very well because she was the director, and one of my goals was to do everything right so I didn't have to find myself into her office. Okay. And I more or less met that. I think she knew who I was because I kept up with everybody. Miss Blake I knew a little better because she would come on the areas where we were, but I didn't, she never taught me. In other words, they were like the principal and vice principal kind of roles in our lives. I'm trying to think of any particular story. I remember one, do you know, have you ever read the book Christie? There was a series of TV series about that.
What was it, like
it was
young adult, or?
It was a story about this teacher that went up into the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah, I haven't read that. That's interesting.
Catherine Marshall wrote it.
Okay.
The point I'm getting to is that when I was doing my pediatrics, when pediatrics was our rotation as far as nursing, I stayed up all night one night, which was really not me at all, because I had to finish reading that book. I'm an avid reader, but I can remember how tired I was that next day, and that was Miss Geneva Hilton's class. Okay. And I'm thinking, oh, I might fall asleep in that. But one of the things we did in pediatrics, we dressed up like children at different stages of development and had this, I guess we just did presentations, but we had to really dress up too. That was kind of unusual.
So would you dress up, say, as a toddler and say, at this age, this is what you can expect?
Yeah. Act as, pantomime or whatever. Yeah, the different stages.
But that's a great way to learn, I think, to make it fun.
Yeah, and we had to also do a giant project then where we actually had to make a scrapbook of the stages of growth and development.
Okay.
I think I finally gave mine to my pediatrician's son, and there is no telling where it might be now,
Right.
because he's out of the country. He's in Peru, so it's probably long gone, but that's okay too.
Well, I'm sorry, were you going to say something? Okay. Since you went to the School of Nursing, and since you went through that program, you've worked with nurses who have had training from all different places. Do you think Grady maybe prepared you in ways that other nursing schools?
Absolutely.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
When I went to school, there were already some of the 2-year schools were starting to show up. Mm-hmm. And people wanted to know, well, why don't you just go to a 2-year school that's closer to home? But I had a really strong desire to not only be a nurse, but to be an excellent nurse. And now, and of course, when we were going through the program, I felt like probably every nursing program was giving the same caliber education. But then when I got home and started working and seeing, and certainly when I started hiring nurses, because so much of my career has been manager, I realized, oh my goodness, our program was so different. And what was different, Tracy, was the amount of time that was actually spent at the patient's bedside. I'm all for course work as far as, quote, book learning and all of the, class education, classroom education, and all that. But there's so much that you can't get unless you're actually with a patient. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the shortcomings, or at least the negatives somewhat of some of the, not only the 2-year programs, but the 4-year programs, is the amount of clinical. And when you asked me a while ago about our clinic, when our day would start, and where I've been involved and actually had students mm-hmm. in my areas, 2 hours, 3 hours, you spend almost as much time by the time you get settled into the area and know who your patient's going to be, and kind of get a feel for where are they in their day, much less their plan of care and their treatment program, that it's time to leave for the day. Mm-hmm. And so the really getting into what's going on with this patient, are they in the diagnostic phase? What's their presenting complaint? What's been done to try to figure it out? What have those results shown? What treatment's being done? And how is that treatment working? Or we got to try to figure out something else? It takes time with the patient to figure all that out. And actually being there and being there for the rounds with the doctors, mm-hmm. being there, doing the treatments, whether it's, and I know patient care is so fragmented now with so many specialties, and I have nothing against that, because I know that specialization should result in more expert care. But it takes a lot of making sure a follow through and making sure that all the handoffs happen like they should, and that there's communications at that handoff so that nothing falls through the cracks. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that, because you can lose ground. Mm-hmm. You can lose ground because somebody thought somebody else did, and so-and-so should have, or it should have been in the record, or this kind of stuff. but just there's nothing that can, there's no amount of book learning that can show you how to be a nurse. It's got to be hands-on. Mm-hmm. And now when there's so much information technology, again, is so great, but it's very challenging. It takes so much time for the nurse. Mm-hmm. The last couple of times I've been sitting beside a patient in the hospital, I've been saddened by, and I may be there for hours. I've been saddened by the very brief moments, not minutes, but moments, that the nurse is actually there. And I don't know because you kind of do what you learn to do, what you're trained to do. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure that we'll ever have nurses like Grady nurses again. And I certainly don't mean to criticize anyone, but your question for me is, did I get a good education? And they absolutely. And I think it's been amazing to me through my career. I go to meetings, and the amount of responsibility and the number of Grady graduates that were in managers' positions, and even, that had, if you look around and you see a hard job in any hospital, if there's a Grady graduate available, they're going to be right in the middle of that. And a lot of Grady graduates went on and got their baccalaureate degrees, mm-hmm. and that's great. And I'm not in any way critical of education. I think it's great. But the point I'm making is that you have to have that basics. You have to be at the patient's bedside to be able to learn, mm-hmm. to observe and to think critically. If I see this, that may mean this or this, and therefore I'm going to have to dig a little deeper, mm-hmm. to see. Mm-hmm. So then I'll make sure that this patient's going to get a good outcome, that I'm not going to miss something that is very, very important. Mm-hmm. And it just takes time with the patient. And because we were there every day, I'm not meaning literally every day, mm-hmm. but every clinic day, right. We were there for 8 hours. Mm-hmm. You just kind of, it soaks in. In other words, mm-hmm. you learn how to do it, but there has to be that time for it becoming more than just, we learned it in the classroom, but then taking that head knowledge into more than just spitting out facts for a test. How you put it all together, and what does this mean related to this patient at mm-hmm. this particular time, mm-hmm. in their health, the problems they're going through with their health. So
that's interesting. I had a follow-up question. I kind of blanked on it. So, and you've worked with a lot of people. You've had a lot of different responsibilities. Do you feel like, just beyond the actual training and the hands-on stuff that you learned, the books, things like that, do you think that leadership there, because leadership is kind of something that it can't really be taught. It has to, that is, like you were saying, observed. It has to be like you teach by doing.
Right.
Do you feel like the leadership at the School of Nursing was stronger than maybe leadership you've seen in other places, that it really that an example was provided for you that helped you be a good leader? You may not even think of yourself that way.
I think the leadership at Grady was very, very definite.
Mm-hmm.
We all knew who the leaders were,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not just in the School of Nursing, certainly that, but on the wards we knew the supervisor. There was definite roles,
Mm-hmm.
and we respected that roles,
Mm-hmm.
and that helped form our understanding, I think, of how to be a good leader.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, because I'm kind of thinking of leadership as different from what your position title is.
oh, absolutely.
You see what I mean?
In a group,
Because somebody can be in charge of everything and maybe not be the best leader.
right.
So.
That's right. But yes, I feel like that there was good leadership training there, both by example and by giving us the assignment. One of our courses in our senior year was team leadership.
Okay, so you actually did get a course
So
in
we
leadership.
did.
Okay.
Yes, that was our clinical,
Okay.
where we made the assignments and we had to kind of be there watching everything and overseeing everything, and if something that needed to be done that didn't get done, whether somebody didn't get lunch or a patient didn't get bathed or whatever, the whole, oh yeah, we did that. You know, inherent in my whole life has been, I've been a leader in my home, my position in the family, my sister and then my brother I'm 15 months younger than him. But when she left the home, I was 9 years old. And we had that was the year the twins were born. We had a 3-year-old, and we had a 17-month-old, and then we had these twins born. And I was very much helping take care of all of them and seeing to the needs of the household, really, whether it was washing clothes or ironing or cooking or cleaning or changing diapers or whatever needed to be done. I just grew up, and that's neither good or bad. It's what it was. There was pluses and minuses to it. The same as I went through school, in the classroom and in clubs that I was in. I just became a leader. And I saw that it was sort of a natural thing for me because I had been doing it. But, I guess that's just part of who I am. And again, there's the pluses because sometimes you're the good guy and sometimes you're not the good guy. I used to come home from the OR where I had a staff of about 65 because I was over the not only OR but the recovery area and the ambulatory surgery. Plus I had these 65 docs that I was surgeons try to keep happy. And their motto is, I want what I want when I want it. Whether it's what time they were going to operate that day, what kind of suture they want to use or whatever. But I'd go home and I would be saying, oh, this and this happened. And my husband would say, well, honey, just remember that you're the boss. And because you're the boss, some days you're just going to be that old SOB. So you're just going to have to realize it has nothing to do with you. It's just your position and your title. But I think we did get good leadership exampled. Plus we had the opportunity for learning it hands-on because we were given those assignments.
Okay. And then when you graduated, you came back to Waresboro?
Waycross. Well, Waresboro is 7 miles from Waycross.
Okay.
Waycross is the county seat, and it's where, it's like 30,000 people. So Waresboro is a little hamlet. It doesn't even have a traffic light. It had a caution light, but I think they took that down because we've got Carter Z. Have you heard of, or 520? That's a 4-lane that goes from Tifton down all the way to Brunswick. When we got that 4-lane, it bypassed a lot of the traffic in our little towns. I think we still have a post office, but it's only open half a day now. But anyway, so Wearsboro is very tiny.
Okay.
But Waycross, so we get our mail Waycross address.
Okay.
But I moved back. I graduated on the 25th of August. We got married on September the 12th and moved into our first little house. And I started to work on October the 5th. Or maybe it was the 3rd. First week in October anyway. So then I went and took my boards in Atlanta a little bit later in that month. I rode from a dear friend who lived in Valdosta, and we went to Atlanta 2 full days, 2 full 8-hour days riding, filling, I think we had the little answer sheets where you did in the
Scantron.
Yes. I can remember walking out thinking, I hope nobody asks me my name because I'm not sure I could tell them. And now they go in and start clicking on answers in the computer, and once you get to a certain point that they think you're through. So you may answer 50 questions or you may answer 60 or 75.
Really? That's interesting.
That is very, you might, if you are interested, you might ask about that, but that's my perception from what I hear people saying.
Okay.
It's very, very different. And of course you can go to Savannah, several different places. We went to, and we stayed with a sweet little couple that we'd gotten to know from going to their church some, and you talked about fried chicken a while ago. She made the best fried chicken in the whole world. She soaked it in buttermilk. And I can't even remember their names because they were very elderly. They were in their 60s or later when we were there. So they've been dead for many, many years. But I remember going, and she had all that ready for us after we came out of that test that first day. Now the second day, we got out of the test and drove home. But that one night that we were there, she made us a wonderful meal. And it was just, there was so much comfort in that after being in that test all day long.
Well, how long have you been married?
44 years.
Just this last month, 44 years.
Yes, 44 years.
Well, tell me about your family.
We have 2 sons. One was our older, Eric, who lives in this house, was born in 1977. And then our younger son, Nathan, was born in Eric was born in 1973, and Nathan was born in 1977. And great guys, worked hard. We expected them. Their dad learned so many things at his father's side, and he has tried to pass some of those on. And again, it's kind of like the nursing thing. You absorb so much when you're at your dad's side. And our grandchildren have this thing, they say, Papa can fix anything. And while that may not be literally true, he does a lot of things.
If he's a machinist, I imagine he can.
He does.
Yeah.
And he's always felt that he needed to pass on that to his sons. And so they are well-rounded, and they had a lot of advantages that neither he nor I had, which is what you want for your children. But you also want them to be grounded in appreciating and working. So we didn't give them everything they wanted. Well, we couldn't have afforded, I don't think, because we both worked and we worked hard to have a home and have, vehicles. And they both went... Eric graduated. They were both honor graduates from high school. They played tennis. They were in all the extracurricular things. Eric came here in 1991 to Macon and graduated from Mercer from the Stetson Business School. He now does some guest lecturing there. But his main job, he's a wealth manager at Morgan Stanley.
Okay.
So he's done very well. But his roots are still, as you can see, or we could walk out and look at his little garden spot that he's had.
Okay.
And he gets his triplets mow the grass during the summer when they're off.
And for people who can't see this place, I mean, that's a substantial amount of grass to mow.
And he wants them. He did it. He was doing it, but then he had all these allergies, and he got so busy in his work that he finally realized. So he hired someone to do it. Mm-hmm. But when they turned 12, I think, he said, "Okay, boys, it's time for y'all to learn." The point being that he feels very responsible, that they learn some things. They have chores and all that. But very blessed. And we're very blessed. His wife is a lovely. We couldn't have chosen anyone. But to God be the glory for all of that, because a lot of prayers, as parents have a lot of concerns, but certainly high on that list is that their children find spouses that they can love and be loved, and that have the same values that they have. Our younger son, Nathan, went to the University of Georgia. Pre-med. He was biology or microbiology, I don't remember. But then he went to Augusta, to Medical College of Georgia, and graduated there. He was in practice for 3 years while they paid off. His wife also is a doctor. She never did a residency because they started their family and they felt it was more important for her to be in the home raising the children. But after they paid off their med school loans, they went to Cusco, Peru, where they're doing medical missionary work.
Okay, wow.
And they have 5 children.
And they're still there?
They are still there. They went to Costa Rica for a year to learn to speak Spanish well enough that he could converse and actually do patient care. Mm-hmm. They were there. And then they've been in Cusco. They've started year 4. They're actually coming home for leave. They'll be in the States on the 14th of October, so I'm so excited. We can't stand it. But they're doing a great work there. There was an established clinic. They've expanded that very much. But their main thrust is to help medical students, nursing students, dental students. And there are 2 medical schools in Cusco. That's one of the reasons that they were led there, to really learn to know who Jesus is. So their thing is healing in the name of Jesus, because they feel like that's the best way to help this city and therefore this country. They're training them in medicine, and they're actually giving medical care based on the patient's ability to pay, which means if they don't have any ability to pay, they get free health care. He's teaching in one of the med schools. They've established rapport with the medical schools. They're having students come in and job shadow them. They have dentists now that are working in the clinic. They have an occupational therapist, a physical therapist that work part-time. They have a psychologist, because there's a lot of need for that. There's a lot of abuse. There's a lot of depression. And there's conditions, it's a third world country. So, and they have an ophthalmologist that's part of their team. There's a group of 5 families that are down there all together. So they've been very blessed, and that has been a very successful endeavor. Now, I told you about my mom when my brother was in Vietnam and her struggle. Well, this mom's had some struggles with seeing that son and those
and his wife and those grandchildren. So my moment of insight from the Holy Spirit was, Linda, you're looking at this from your perspective. You need to start looking at this from my kingdom's perspective.
Right.
So I've had my aha moments too, but bottom line is God is faithful. And it is a good life. Grady was very instrumental in allowing me to work, to be productive. But I think it's been more than just a paycheck. I really feel like that I have been able to minister to people. And of course, and all these siblings, can you imagine how many? Our family's at about 85, just in the siblings, and they're growing and growing.
Oh.
None of us had over 3 children, but our children have more than, So anyway, a lot of ministry, a lot of learning, living, seeing now my grandchildren, and one of our grandsons almost died in 2010. One of these triplets that live in this household. And that was a hard, difficult time. He had H1N1 virus and got very sick very quickly. His brothers, they all had it one day, as far as high fevers and stuff. The other 2 were much better in 36 hours. He continued to get worse, went to an urgent care, was not diagnosed, but went to his pediatrician the next morning, and he had, at that time, a hole in his lung from the infection that contaminated, blew out into his mediastinum, which is the space around his heart and everything. And the infection was so bad that it almost killed him. He had to be on life support for many days. So I've seen the progress in healthcare. I think if that had happened to one of my kids, that he probably would not have survived, because we didn't have all the medications and didn't have all the equipment and the expertise. So that's been a telling, it's made me very thankful. On the other hand, it's always more difficult to see someone you love be sick because of your knowledge level.
Right.
So it's a mixed blessing, but we've had a good life, and I feel like we've contributed, but our blessings have been many, many, many. And I think probably that I wasn't really excited about my son becoming a doctor, because I know all the trials and tribulations. But I'm sure that some of the stuff that he had seen from, the satisfaction I got out of it probably influenced him. And he certainly is in it with 1,000% right now.
Then, real dedication.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to mention before we wrap up?
I think we've pretty much covered it. I do appreciate the steadfastness of my husband. I can only imagine if he had been less supportive of me, I probably would not have been able to stay and actually do what I intended to keep on keeping on until I got to the finish line.
Right.
So that's been a real blessing, and he's certainly been steadfast throughout the years. My dad lived to be almost 66, and then my mom lived up to be almost 87. So we've had the blessings not only of And they're always encouraging to all of us and promoting working hard, getting as much education you can, but never forgetting your roots and always staying connected to our Heavenly Father, to God, and being strong in the faith. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that have been important to us and has been instrumental in making us who we are, but also in allowing us, again, I think about my family, my siblings. We're firemen and we're electricians and we're nurses and we're, one brother was a radiologist, but all of us working hard, trying to do our part to contribute something. So, but thank you for listening to my story.
Well, thank you for telling such a great story.